I hope they remember you.
Hi folks, this is Luke Hector at The Broken Meeple, a show devoted to board games where I give reviews and top 10s and various other variety content. So today we're talking about Shipwrights of the North Sea Redux. Now, Garphill Games is a publisher that, yeah, no shocker, I like a lot of their games. Not all of their games, some of them I don't, but there's quite a few on my shelf in the other room. Now, I never played Shipwrights of the North Sea, the original version, but all I hear about it is bad, terrible crap, blah, blah, blah. You know, nobody really talks highly of the original Shipwrights. Hell, not even the publisher really talks that highly of the original Shipwrights. That says it all. So what they have done is essentially in their kind of big box line, where it's now a proper size for a game box, although in this case probably still oversized, they essentially have released this as a Redux. So they've completely changed how the game was from the original. They kept the same theming and the same look to make it fit with the whole North Sea trilogy, but they've changed the rules and made it somewhat more comparable to Legacy of You, which is one of their solo-only games, which I've not actually played, but the mechanics in there have got some similarities. So I decided to back this on Kickstarter to see if this was, worth grabbing. I figured, you know what, it's worth a punt for the reasonable value that it had for a Kickstarter, considering most of them are crazy expensive, to see whether this improvement was now going to elevate the game to something I want on my shelf.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
The game plays over several rounds where players are drafting cards from this fairly large deck until they have 6 for the round, and then they are using these 6 cards in whatever way they can, every which way but loose, to try and score victory points, gain resources, build longships, and just generally run an efficient engine. The cards themselves comes in a lot of different varieties. You have the longships that you can build. They can get you endgame scoring, some bonuses, some levels up on these free tracks. You've got the various crew that can go in underneath your buildings and upgrade the abilities that they do. You have crafts people, which you need in order to build the longships. They have various skills that you need in order to satisfy the criteria. As I mentioned, buildings, you have meeples in the game that you can use as a cost, but also to actually go on the buildings to trigger abilities. There's a lot of different things in this deck that you can do with them, and they're all multi-use. Not only do they have their primary ability that I just mentioned, but every single card can be discarded to gain you a bonus as well. So you can have 6 cards at the start of a round and think, well, okay, I'm gonna probably prep this one for later, then I'm gonna build this. Right, I'll spend some resources, okay, spend those, right, fine, but I could do with another sheep. Well, hang on, I don't need this one, so I'll discard that, get one of those, fine. You know what, we'll discard him and get another one of those as well. Cool, that means I can, let's see, I've got a spare gold here, so I'm gonna spend that gold, I'm gonna put the mercenary underneath this building, and I'm gonna use a meeple to trigger the market hall, get 2 sheep, and format. You do a lot of this. You're basically using these multi-use cards any way you can to get as much as you can possibly squeeze out of every single one. It's not just about running an efficient engine, it's about just getting the biggest value out of the cards that you've got. When the round ends, you compare the free tracks that players will level on, and these will enable you to get some potential bonus cards for the round. So if you level up on the red track, you can gain settlements that you can put meeples towards to get you future bonuses, effectively raiding. Higher up on the blue track, you can get trade cards, which get you more income during the income phase of a round, so they just get you more resources and cool bonuses. And thirdly, you can upgrade your starting buildings, where you have a basic boat, you have a basic laborer and a basic hut. They are sort of basic versions to begin with, but then if you level up on the yellow track, you'll be able to upgrade these to score more points and improve their normal abilities. But it's also not just a case of, oh, what can I do with the 6 cards? You also have round cards that are specific to the game. You'll get 5 of these at random, and these have differing values for trade. So when you trade with these cards, you can spend the silver to get the resources you need, but one round the sheep are expensive. Now they're still expensive. Now wood's expensive, stone's cheap, stone's still cheap, everything else is expensive, stone's expensive, wood is cheap. So these will change up as the game goes on. You play through 5 rounds in an identical fashion. Draft until you've got the 6 cards, then use the 6 cards however you can, get the points, see where you are on the tracks, rinse and repeat another 4 times, and then, of course, at the end of the game, total up all the victory points and see who wins.
That's easy!
Components-wise, there's not a lot to say, although the box is probably a little oversized for what's in here. I mean, you've got plenty of room to house the cards and the resources, but as you can see, there's a lot of wasted space at the edges where this actually could, shock horror, have fitted in one of those smaller boxes that Garphill Games used to do, but at least this will stack nicely along with everything else on your shelf, so it's not that big a deal. But components-wise, it's decent. I mean, the cards are still of the same quality that they usually are, which means that they are nice feeling, they're linen finished, but they're also a little on the flimsy side, so you might want to sleeve these when you can. The annoying thing is that in order to sleeve these cards, you have to get the North Sea compatible sleeves, which usually run out of stock pretty quickly and can't be used in any other game that isn't a Garphill one.
And it's gone.
On top of that, you've got the standard wooden meeples, wooden pieces for the various resources. You've got the meeples that are kind of reminiscent of what was in Raiders in the North Sea in there, and you can get the normal cardboard coins, or you can invest in the metal coins like I like to. The metal coins feel cool and they're relatively cheap for metal coins, so it's not too bad to grab these. Artwork wise, it's the same artwork we've seen before from the Miko, and it looks great as always. In fact, in this one, it looks a little bit more colourful than otherwise, you know, a lot of their other games, mainly because of the mix of cards. Because you've got, you know, close-up portraits of the various characters, but then you've got, you know, really nice, like views of the longships on oceans sailing along. Then you've got the different buildings on land, and then you've got the various other sort of crew members of different types. There's a lot of variation in here, and when you've got all the cards laid out in front of you, it does look pretty pretty. But yeah, this isn't necessarily going to win an award for components, but it does look the part for what you pay.
Spared no expense.
Oh my word. Is it so relieving to have a game that's this easy to learn? Wow! The Euro games these days have to be super complicated and give me 3 hours to learn the game, and then you gotta teach it with a front-loaded teach. This is probably the simplest game I've come across in the Garphill Games line. Maybe there's one or two that you could argue are slightly simpler. I mean, it's debatable, but you know, this one is not a difficult game. Now, it's not gateway level. Do not make that mistake. It's a good entry point into Garphill Games generally, alongside, say, Raiders of the North Sea and Architects of the West Kingdom, if you want to get into this series. But don't think you're going to show someone brand new to games this game that's just too much you got to juggle. It would not go down well. But, you know, aside from a couple of layout issues, I didn't have any trouble learning the rules from this book. There's not a lot of pages you've got to learn, although I probably would have liked a few more pictorial examples. You know, they've got some in here, but not a lot. It is mostly a wall of text, but you don't have that much text to read. And if you've played the other Garphill Games stuff, you're going to learn this in like 20-25 minutes, you know, 30 minutes tops if you're reading it from scratch. You know, it's not complicated, and a lot of the iconography is as intuitive as it always is on these games. So, you know, if you're thinking about, oh, is this going to be another bugbear to learn and teach, it really is not.
Actually, it's going to be super easy, barely an inconvenience.
So the whole meat of this game is the engine building with the cards. If it can't get this bit right, the whole game falls apart. Thankfully, it does get this bit right. This is very enjoyable. You know, I love multi-use cards in games. I talk about Valley of the Kings and various other games where you use a card for multiple uses. That's always something I find fun. Even in bad games, that mechanic will always be something I like. But this one sort of takes it up another notch because you have 6 cards as the round starts, and the drafting is fun, particularly in certain player counts. We'll get to that in a bit. But with those 6 cards, you think, well, that's not a lot, just 6 cards. But you could get more, and it's not just the 6 cards. So I've got these 6 cards, but by various actions, I might be able to draw a couple more. So, okay, now I've got 8 cards to play with. Okay, great. Well, let's see. I want to discard this for a resource, but I could build it. Well, oh no, let's discard that one and that one. Get the resources. That lets me build this thing. Great. And then I need to get a Jarl. All right, well, I can pay a gold to put this one down. We'll put it down under me market hall. We'll get another, you know, what gatekeeper would be cool. You know, we can plop him down later. Get a building. I could trade with this. You know, I can pay some money to get some wood. That would let me get this ship, which if I discard, say, this card, and then, you know, draw another one from the deck with that ability. Oh, market hall, build that, right? Put that on the market hall, get 2 sheep. Could probably use that later. And it's like, this is the thinking process. When you start the round for the engine building with the cards, your head is at your board and you are looking at nothing else. There's a good and a bad side to this. We'll get onto the bad bit later, but you are engrossed in the engine that you are building, and it is satisfying. It feels good to pull off some cool, not necessarily combos, but definitely to have your engine feel like it worked. You can occasionally have a round that it doesn't go too well with the luck of the draw. We'll get onto that a bit later. But the general engine building with this, you can have some rounds where you feel like, oh, that was a lot. Whew, I got quite a bit done that turn. That was pretty sweet. And now look at all this stuff I've got to play with in future rounds. It's very addictive to go through this, especially when the rules for them are not complicated. Once you've got the basic rules down, you are just going through this engine with these cards, doing whatever it is you need to do without really any interruptions for like, hang on, let me go check the book and how this works again. Oh, how's that work again? Oh, what's that icon mean? It's like, nah, it's pretty clear cut.
I admire its purity.
The game is very much a tactical affair. It's not a strategic affair. You might build up an engine that says, oh, I'm really good with stone, really good with wood, and that can at least be the forefront of how you get stuff. But you can't say at the start of the game, right, I'm going to build a bucket load of Longships this time. No, it depends what cards you get. You have to play very tactically and adapt to what you are given. There is a negative to that, but you know, for the most part, it's a positive experience. That means that you get to sort of chop and change what it is you do as each round progresses and watch everything just unfold on your board. Again, very satisfying. Now, the luck of the draw aspect is always something to consider with card games, and this one is no exception. Yes, you are drafting the cards, or in a solo mode doing some kind of weird pseudo draft. But even so, you are drafting from a pretty big deck of cards. I mean, this deck is quite big, and I've unloaded a ton of it all over the board already. I mean, there's another batch, you know, there's another lot to there, and you're only going to get a few of these. So there's a lot of variation in here, although there is repetition with some of the abilities and what the bonuses they give you. But you can have a round where the cards that you end up with are just straight up garbage, or they could be perfect for what you need. You might be really gunning for a couple of buildings, and you know, suddenly you can't get those buildings because they didn't turn up in your initial draft of cards. Well, what are you supposed to do about it? You can't do jack, and you might not have enough to work with everything else, so you know, you're in a slightly worse position than anybody else. On top of that, there is definitely a feel in this game that there's no card that's necessarily more powerful than others. I mean, you know, I've heard some people, Dicestar and a couple of others, complain about the Jarls being too powerful. I don't think that's the case. The Jarls can be good for leveling up on the tracks, but they do cost a gold to put out, which is a scarce resource, and that's all they give you, just the track level ups. It doesn't really propel your engine as much. So they are good, and I certainly wouldn't ignore them, but they're the only way you can also discard something for a gold, which is handy. So yes, they're good, but I don't think they're super powerful. One thing that I have noticed is kind of almost essential for you to get, though, is buildings.
Look at me! I'm Dr. Zoidberg, homeowner!
Buildings are used with the Meeples, and if you have an excess of Meeples and no buildings to use on, that's very inefficient. But buildings are a great way to get resources and sort of get your engine going. Getting one or two of these out at the start of the game is pretty much paramount. You really want to do that. I've never seen anybody do well at the game having no buildings. You need to have some, and the earlier you can get them, the better. If your initial hand of cards is nothing but Longships, good luck with that, because you just won't be able to physically generate enough resources to actually build the wretched things. So as much as the game is not a particularly long one, I mean, the game's only about 60 odd minutes on the clock, and that's reasonably accurate to a point. You know, it's not a long game, but you do have to accept that sometimes the cards will just hose you.
I'm lucky.
That's not a superpower.
Yeah, it is.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, it is.
No, it isn't.
We do have to get to the elephant in the room, though, with this game, and that is the solitaire nature of it. This game can be played with 1 to 5 players. I cannot fathom a single reason why you would play this game, honestly, with more players than 1. Literally no more than 1. 2 players, you could possibly argue there's an element of hate drafting that's doable, but even then you are basically focused on your own puzzle. 3 to 5, especially 5? Why would you play this with 5 players?
5 is right out.
You know, some people use the cop-out excuse of, well, I like to socialise with other players. Yeah, I get it. It's not exactly a hard concept. I like to socialise with people too, but you can't use that as an excuse to make a game that's entirely solitaire, multiplayer, and let it off for it. That's not how it works. So with this one, the only thing that happens in a multiplayer game is you do the draft, which is a bit more limiting because you don't see, you know, you're only picking one card out of a pack as they go around. So, you know, the luck of the draw aspect is slightly exasperated there. But also, when you are finished drafting, the other players blot out of existence. You are looking at your board, you are doing your cool stuff with your engine, and that is it. You have no idea what they're doing. You don't even know if they're playing the game correctly. You could look at their board and for all you know they have cheated or got the rules completely wrong and you would have no idea they've done it because you are not focused on them. You also cannot look at their board and have any concept as to whether any card is going to be hate drafted. There's just not enough, you cannot focus on that aspect as well as your own thing. And if you try to do it, you'll just cause a rocket ton of AP and it will slow the game down. And 60 minutes with 5 players, that's a tricky target to meet actually, because you got to wait for 5 people to finish their entire engine off because it is simultaneous, but you're only as fast as the lowest common denominator. One slow person in a 5-player game, you're screwed. It's just not going to work.
This is why Superman works alone.
And this game is designed entirely for solo because normally in Garphill Games they explain the solo mode at the back of the book separate from everything else. Here, the solo mode is explained throughout, and there's only 2 aspects, the drafting phase and how you beat the AI score that it generates. That's it. The trade card has a thing that levels up some neutral pawns for the tracks. And that is it. There is nothing else that changes from multiplayer to solo apart from how you draft cards. And honestly, the drafting is so much better in the solo mode because in normal 3 to 5 players you draft as you would in say 7 Wonders or that kind of thing. But in the solo play, you draw 5 cards, you select 2 to keep and then put the rest aside. You then select another 4 cards. Pick 2 of those and put the rest away. You then select another 3 cards, pick 2 of those and put the other one away. So you are looking at a decent chunk of cards in solo mode. You have a little bit more flexibility as to what cards you're picking for the round, and it's a cool decision process to actually think about, okay, well, out of these cards, I need 2. Well, that I definitely need, what do I feel about out of these ones? And that is fulfilling. And then once you're done with that little solo draft, you get on with your engine and then you can get through the game easily in the 60-minute time frame. There just isn't any reason to play this with more than 1 player. And that sounds like I'm making it a bigger negative than it actually is. It is still a negative of the game. The game is, designed to be played with 1 to 5 players, and there just legitimately isn't really a real reason to play this with more than just yourself. 2 players, absolute max. I could understand if you want to play this with 2, but 3 to 5, why? I've tried it, it didn't add anything to the game. If anything, it dragged it out. I much preferred playing it solo, and I think this game is entirely going to be a solo game because it works great as a solo game. It doesn't work any better. If anything, it's worse when you throw in a multiplayer. So I have not played the original Shipwrights, bear in mind, so ignore that aspect. As a standalone game though, this is really solid. I really enjoy the engine building part with this card deck and building from the multi-use cards a cool efficient engine with different cards that you'll use each game. That bit is solid fun. I cannot ignore though the 2 light issues with the game. Firstly, luck of the draw. The luck of the draw aspect is still a problem with the game because you do have a lot of cards and you're not drawing that many from each deck, so each in the draft at a time, so your engine is good as you can make it. And as much as this game is about adapting to the cards you've got, you could just end up with a bunch of cards that are frankly unworkable. And certainly when you play this multiplayer, for whatever reason, you're going to have times where somebody just happens to get really good cards that suits them and you're almost jealous of them thinking, well, hang on a minute, it would have been good if I could have got a couple of buildings this round, but you've got your buildings, so that doesn't really feel that fair. But that links on to the whole other issue that this is designed for 1 to 5 players, and in no way, shape or form should you ever play this with more than 2, and frankly even 2 is not even that worthwhile. This is a solo game through and through, and if you play it only as a solo game, you're in with a really good shout here. But the multiplayer part is wasted. It almost feels pointless even giving it a rating because at no point in the future am I ever going to bring this out multiplayer again. So, check out the player scaling verdict at the after this rating, but overall I'm still giving Shipwrights of the North Sea an 8 out of 10. It could maybe go up to a 9 overall as time goes by, but the multiplayer aspect and the luck of the draw is what kind of drags the game down a bit. But as a solo only game, you could prop this up to a 9 out of 10 and make it distinction level because the engine building part is still really good fun and engaging and interesting, with enough variety to keep it relatively fresh each game. It's very enjoyable. But this game isn't released only as a solo game. That was more Legacy of You, which I've not played. You know, I don't know how to compare the two. But, you know, if this had just been released as a solo-only game, and, you know, had a little bit more, say, mitigation with the luck aspect than just a little bit of a semi-draft, then this could easily be in the distinction level category. But 8 is still a great game. It's still one that I really enjoy. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to hang on to it. This is a Kickstarter purchase I don't regret. There have been one or two that I have regretted recently. I'll have to check out the reviews on those ones. But yeah, overall, a solid Redux version. I mean, did it really need to be a Redux? It could have just been its own standalone game, really, but whatever. That's a minor thing. As a solo engine builder, though, this is one of my favorites I've played in a while.
It sounds dreamy.
So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Don't forget to check out the other content that I've done recently. I've done some reviews. I've done the odd live stream top 10. There will be a review going up soon, if not already, for September, the deluxe Kickstarter that I bought a while ago. Check out my thoughts as to whether that was a worthy purchase or not. And of course, let me know your comments down below. Did you like the original Shipwrights? Are they comparable in any way? How would you compare this to Legacy of You, where the mechanic is slightly similar? Did you enjoy this? Did you not like it? Are you one of the people that actually loves playing this multiplayer for whatever reason? By all means, let us know your thoughts and let's get everybody's viewpoint on the channel. Until next time, regardless of whether you intend to play this with anybody at all or not, it's still only a game. So have fun, whether it's by yourself or with others. Take care.